Alright guys, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another video after the INT Legendary Super Saiyan BROLY recently EZA'd. It's time to test him out in some difficult content, which I'm really intrigued to see how he does. Especially because the most recent consensus with him, which I completely understand because I also feel the same way to an extent, is that he's quite underwhelming, which I think he is a bit. I wouldn't go as far to say he's mid. I wouldn't go as far as to say he's bad. He's still a good EZA. He's still very solid. I just think the 20% stack he gets on defense, especially with the conditional damage reduction, which funny enough, in this red zone Kid BUU fight, which is funny enough one of the only difficult current events in the game where people are still trying units out, this is one of the only places where he won't be getting any, not even just the Goku restrictive damage reduction and crit chance, any of his additional damage reduction. So we're not getting any of the extra 18% for facing a pure Saiyan, hybrid Saiyan, or movie heroes enemy, or the 15% for facing a Goku enemy. Kid BUU, of course, falls under none of them conditions. So all BROLY is rolling with right now is his sheer stacking, which is only 20%. Which means we also, unfortunately, lose out on that 70% chance of an additional. So it's the 50 and the dupe system. And we're just relying on that 26% damage reduction and his stacking. And we're going to see how he does. Now, right now in the game, as I mentioned while actually trying him out, this is actually going to be quite an unfamiliar environment for BROLY. Just because right now in the game and going forward, especially with how heavy on Dokkan has been recently with dropping new Supreme Magnificent battles and that always being based around superclass enemies. Typically, I don't think we're going to see BROLY be in this situation all too much, if I'm being completely honest. Can I get the dodge? Can I get the dodge so I don't have to use an item? I can't get the dodge. So I'm actually going to Whis, even though that might not save us. I mean, they might just use their 50% chance to dodge regardless. But this is a situation that I don't think BROLY will find himself in too often if you were to use him. Just because, again, a lot of the difficult content nowadays has been Supreme Magnificent Battle, which is always or typically around superclass enemies. So you're going to be seeing more frequently Goku specifically, which is great because then BROLY gets the double buff and gets all of his damage reduction and will actually perform really well. With all of those additionals, especially having one of them guaranteed, but having 4 possible super attacks along with 5 of a potential system and skill orbs, but then also the extra 15% damage reduction, BROLY's actually really good. Without the Goku condition, without that part of his passive, I think he's still very solid, but he's obviously he is a bit more on the weaker side, and we're going to find that out when we do try him out against, well, for example, right now against Kid BUU with none of it. Dodge it, maybe? Yes! Love that. And then eventually, what you're usually and typically going to have active more often than not is that middle part of his passive where he gets the extra 18% for pure Saiyans, hybrid Saiyans, and movie heroes enemies against, say, you know, the current Supreme Magnificent Battle that's going on, Supreme Magnificent Battle Beast. But right now, a lot of the time, there is enemies that fit that portion of his passive. So I think BROLY having none of his extra, you know, damage reduction and additionals isn't really going to happen too often. Just based off the trend that Dokkan has been going on recently with the type of content they're dropping and the enemies that come in Supreme Magnificent Battle, or Blue Zone if you want to call it that. So again, I don't think it's going to be often where BROLY's going to have none of his extra damage reduction or none of his extra buffs. I feel like this is only going to be in a handful of scenarios like Red Zone Kid BUU or any other future Red Zones that drop that aren't probably a BROLY enemy. But I think for the most part, he should be fine. But I did want to see how he does without any extra damage reduction. I mean, we do have a Whis active right now, so he does have an extra 40 on a 26%. So he does actually have 66% damage reduction right now. No extra additional super. Of course, he's still taking double digits on normals. Again, that's from the Weasters carrying over from the last turn. We kind of needed to use, I mean, we didn't, but we kind of needed to use just in case that BROLY, Chi-Line, Lemo didn't dodge. But the way I have to put it, from the very little I've seen, again, this might change the more I use him, is off of the very little I've used him, off of first glance, with the entirety of his passive, with all of those buffs against a Goku enemy, really good. Without it, and just half of his passive, solid. Without any of the extra buffs, we're finding out right now. We're literally finding out right now. I still need to do videos on EZA Team Tier List. Those are pending. Those are pending. We are going to rotate them off. Just because I do want to, of course, do a dedicated video of them on rotation doing their thing, which I really like that EZA. Really, really like that EZA. I think one thing's for certain, though, if BROLY does get super attacked, he's dead. This may not be on, like, the 2.5 milli side, thank God for him. But Kid Buu's still doing, what, 1.8 to 2 million, which BROLY definitely won't be able to contend with 26% damage reduction. Especially because we're hardly getting any additional supers, but I think even if we were getting the extra additional supers, which would only be, what, an extra 2, and that is including the potential system, he still wouldn't have enough defense, because he's only stacking by 20%. So I think here, and again, this is a phrase I've seen used literally within the last couple of days from him, his details being shown and BROLY actually being released, is BROLY looks to be a glass cannon. In this specific scenario, 100%. I think it's unfair to call him a glass cannon with the Pure Saiyan, Hybrid Saiyan, and Movie Heroes buff. I think he's still a glass cannon, but less so. I think that's probably the fairest way to put it. I mean, he still is one, but less so. And then with a Goku enemy, I think he's really, really good. I know that's a very specific time, and that's going to be a very specific situation and scenario. But I'm still sticking to the point of I think that's going to happen a bit more frequently than we think, or it's going to look less restrictive than we first think because it's specifically a Goku enemy. Mainly because of Supreme Magnificent Battle. And there's only so many superclass enemies they're going to do, unless they do like a whole separate themed one where they do something completely left that doesn't involve a Goku whatsoever. Defensively, he's only up to 429k defense. It's just not enough. It's just not enough. But we kind of knew this was going to happen bringing him in here. Not to mention, we may die from BROLY, Chi-Line, and Lemo. Because we're not getting him too many orbs, I'll be real. We're not getting him too many orbs whatsoever. So in BROLY, he's got what, 429k defense with just 26% damage reduction. Of course, we're going to get an extra stack in, which is, I mean, he's still going to be just over 400k. Again, it's only a 20% buff. He's only getting a 20% raise. So it's only going to do so much. And then because we're missing an extra additional, and then of course we're not facing Goku enemies, so we don't have the guaranteed one, we're really not getting any extra stacks in, so he's not even getting any extra damage in either. Okay, double digits on the normals is fine. This is probably going to kill him. It is, isn't it? It's just going to. Yeah, 1.8 mil. Fair. Fair. Now, this is where him being underwhelming really comes in. Because he does have a built-in additional. He, of course, has an extra additional attached to the category enemies, and then a guaranteed additional attached to Goku's. Now, we were facing neither of those in Red Zone Kid Buu. So I feel like if maybe he had an extra additional that wasn't attached to a condition, or maybe that 50% was a 70%, and again, going back to what I've said twice now, that 20% defense raise was 50, so you were getting 50% attack and defense per stack. I feel like he'd be in a little bit of a better scenario. Or maybe if just all of his damage, or a lot more of his damage reduction wasn't attached to conditions, maybe if he just started with a bit more than 26% and then got a little bit extra per condition or per restriction. The one thing I will say is, while this does make him underwhelming, as I said, he can still be good. He can still be very solid. However, I do believe that because of, again, the patterns we've seen in the direction Dokkan's going in with Supreme Magnificent Battle and how often there is going to be Goku enemies, but more so, I won't even say Goku enemies, more so the Pure Saiyan, Hybrid Saiyans, movie heroes enemies, and how many are in the game right now, Broly's still in a good enough spot. So while having all of his passive basically unlocked and ready to go, and you're facing a Goku enemy, he's really, really good. Without it, I still think he's good and he's still solid. Without any of his passive buffs, and you're facing Red Zone Kid Buu, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, he ain't great. He ain't great, because he's not stacking quick enough. Even on the attack, he's not even stacking too much, unless you get really lucky with additionals, which we didn't. And he gets absolutely clocked by a super attack, which I think was a given. Obviously, I think a Whis might have saved him. He would still take damage, but he still would have survived, which I guess is something, but at least, as I said, with the patterns Dokkan are showing, there's going to be more often the enemy's Broly needs to at least get half the damage reduction he needs compared to the full part of his passive and damage reduction he needs. But yeah, so that's probably his worst scenario for him to be in, and he done okay. I mean, he got absolutely mollywopped at the end, but he done okay, I guess. But we'll test him out more against Supreme Magnificent Battle, Beast Gohan, etc., and when more stages drop, and I'm sure he'll have a much better time there. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'll see you in the next video, guys. Take care, have a great rest of your day, and peace.